Have you ever had that one patient that made you question everything that you thought you knew? One patient, one complication, unexpected outcome, and suddenly all your years, 5, 10, 20 years of experience is just completely disappeared overnight. If you're a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant, a physician, a nurse, or really anyone who carries responsibility for another human being, you probably know exactly what this feels like. We spend years learning how to prevent bad outcomes, how to prevent, how to keep people healthy, how to recognize what's wrong, how to fix problems. But nobody teaches us what to do after something goes wrong. No one teaches us how to rebuild that confidence after a patient is hospitalized, or how to separate one heartbreaking outcome from our identity as a clinician or as even a human being. And so today I'm going to share with you one of the hardest patient cases that I've ever had in my experience in 10 years of being a nurse practitioner. And because it completely changed the way I think about mistakes, about confidence, and what it actually means to grow your identity in healthcare. For those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Nicole. I am a rheumatology nurse practitioner, and I help other nurse practitioners find happiness in healthcare and meaningfully connect with their patients in 60 seconds or less. And today's episode is a little bit personal. It's a little bit personal for me. I'm going to share about a recent patient case of mine without going into specific details. Of course, I don't want to give away who the patient is. I work in rheumatology for the last 10 years. We treat autoimmune disease that affect the joints and the tissues, and we use immunosuppressants and biologic medications to really suppress the autoimmune disease and control the symptoms. And I've been doing this for years. I've seen hundreds, probably thousands of patients. Like I know what to do. I love my job. I freaking love my job. I seriously do. I have changed people's lives. I can say that with complete conviction. I have had patients hug me. I have had patients cry with me, give me gifts because I have given them their life back. They can function, they can do things like even little things like brushing their teeth without needing to hold their toothbrush with two hands, or being so nervous that they can't use the bathroom because they're afraid they can't pull their pants up after they're done using the toilet. They don't need to have their husband or their spouse or their wife help them get dressed. They can hold their newborn baby without fear of dropping them. They can use their joints and they feel like they have their life back. And it's stories and moments like this that just give me so much joy, that make me feel like my work is worth it. What I'm doing is so worth it. So, when this one patient case happened, it completely shook me, completely shook my confidence. And it's even hard for me to talk about this right now. This happened really recent. I had a patient have Steven Johnson syndrome from a medication that I prescribed for them. It's still really hard for me to talk about this. Like, I know this patient so well. I know this patient for years. I know this patient's family members. I know them by name. I know them about their lifestyle, what they do for a living. And so when I learned that it was this patient going to the hospital for Steven Johnson syndrome, m- I was shattered. My whole world was like flipped upside down. And, as a nurse practitioner, we learn about Steven Johnson syndrome in training, in school. And, for me professionally, I've never seen it in my life. I've only seen it in textbooks. And it's something that you hope you never see in real life. You really hope you, let alone cause it. For those of you who are listening who don't work in healthcare, first of all, welcome. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Let me explain. So, Stevens Johnson syndrome is like one of the worst things that can happen to a patient. It is literally a nightmare that doctors and nurse practitioners and physician assistants and just anyone in healthcare, we hope we never witness. It is a severe skin allergy reaction, usually to a medication. And it is so bad. It causes rashes, open blisters, open sores, peeling skin all over, like extremities, arms, legs, torso, back, face. It can affect the eyes, the mouth, the mucous membranes inside, even like in the genitals. And it is an absolute emergency. It is an absolute emergency. You have to go to the ER or else you could die. And so, you know, long story short, this patient survived. Thank goodness this patient survived. This patient was luckily transferred to the right appropriate university level tertiary care center and got the right appropriate care that they needed, and they're doing okay. But for days, for weeks, my confidence was gone. I questioned every decision I made from that point on. I questioned, do I know what I'm doing? Am I doing everything right? We're in the business to make people better, not worse, not hospitalized, not with Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And so now I was questioning everything I was doing. I was questioning other medications I was prescribing. I was questioning my diagnoses. I was questioning my interpretation of labs. And and this specific medication that I prescribed for this patient, I have prescribed it hundreds of times. It is typically a safe medication that we don't see a lot of reactions to. Never skin rashes, never Stevens Johnson, nothing to that extreme. And so now I was so scared to prescribe it. And I have so many patients already on it, and I was scared to keep them on it. And it's so interesting. If you're listening and you're on the outside looking in, it's so easy to be objective. It's so easy to say, Nicole, you've been doing this for 10 years. You've been a nurse practitioner in rheumatology for 10 years. You've been doing this longer than some of the doctors you've been working with. You know what you're doing. And you prescribe this medication for years, for hundreds of patients. And this is just one of those really, really rare cases that you hope never happens, but did. And, you always hear people dripping with that positivity, to look on the bright side, to look for the silver lining. Someone could have died from this. Okay. It's so hard to find any positive to this. I mean, working in healthcare, working in medicine is very different because we deal with life and death. All right. These are not lighthearted, joking matters. This is serious. And so, in fact, that's why working in medicine and healthcare can feel so isolating sometimes. It's because it's a high stakes emotional burden on us on a regular basis. There are not a lot of other occupations that have this high stakes emotional burden as part of your job description. And even more so in our professional culture in medicine and healthcare, it discourages us from showing vulnerability. Do you remember back in nursing school, back in NP school, back in those days, you were taught to look for the abnormals. You were taught to look for the symptoms in the patient. What's wrong? Kind of cherry pick what are the things, connect the dots, figure out what's wrong with the patient, what's the diagnosis. And, a nursing diagnosis might go something like this: patient with ineffective airway clearance related to thick mucus, as evidenced by, wheezing of the lung sounds and a weak cough. As nurse practitioners, we're looking for what's wrong. I see new patients every shift, and I'm always scanning for what's wrong. Do they have joint pain? Do they have joint swelling? What are their lab abnormalities? How can I tie this all in? What criteria are they meeting for what diagnosis? Medicine has really taught us to look for what's wrong. What's the abnormal? Where is the lesion? What is the risk for XYZ? What do we need to fix? What do we need to solve? And I mean, let's face it, patients come to their healthcare provider when something's wrong, when they have pain, when they don't feel right, and it makes sense. That's the way we keep people safe. This is this way of thinking that keeps people safe. But medicine has trained us to measure success by avoiding bad outcomes. Medicine has trained us to measure success by avoiding bad outcomes. And this training, for doing this for years, I realized that it's subconsciously trained ourselves, to also look for the wrong in ourselves, to look for the deficiencies in ourselves. It's become this default lens that we see our reality through. And we're trained to believe that improvements come from fixing deficiencies. right? I mean, in the beginning of this episode, I talked about how much I love my work because of all the people I care for and that I've helped, and then I've restored their quality of life back to them. They're so grateful. They feel like I saved their lives. But one mistake, and I am so quick to dismiss all those positives over the last 10 years from one mistake I made recently in the last few weeks. One negative washes away all the positives from all those years of positives. And I started thinking to myself, I should have caught this mistake. I should have prevented this mistake. I should have done things differently. And the word should, whether you say it, whether you think it in your head, the word should does not create energy, does not create motivation, it does not create excitement to get better. It actually creates shame, right? It creates shame in you. You feel shameful. And, as a mom, I have a 6-year-old son. I would never want my son to think this way. Oh my gosh, I would never want him to think this way. He is in grade school now, and I would never want him to think that one bad grade, one bad test score, one bad homework assignment that he failed or didn't do well in will wash away all the other amazing, positive, growth filled things he's done throughout the entire school year. It breaks my heart just to think of my child thinking like that. And so, first of all, if you ever felt this way, that you should be doing better, that you should be working faster, you should be more resilient. First of all, I want you to take a deep breath with me because know that you are not alone. You're so, so not alone. I have been practicing for 10 years and I still struggle with this feeling. But this way of thinking is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And we have to retrain our brains to think differently. Jason Pfeiffer, who's the editor in chief at Entrepreneur Magazine, he says that we often treat the outcome as the validation, especially as business owners. He says whether it was success or not, humans tend to look at the outcome as validation. So if the outcome or the result is successful, whether a business grows, makes money, or your patient gets better on the medication you prescribe, we interpret that as we were smart. We made the right decision. But if the outcome is a failure, if the business flops, doesn't make money, goes bankrupt, can't pay their bills, or we prescribe a medication that cause side effects, that cause uh, them to be hospitalized, for goodness sake, then we, as people or practitioners, we were foolish. We made a mistake. And in a way, the failure of the outcome, the failure becomes a reflection of our self-worth. And that is not fair because we cannot control outcomes, right? We cannot control the outcome. And so I kept thinking to myself, how can I reframe this in a good way? How is this shaping me? This moment that shook my entire confidence. You know, 20 years ago, I was not dealing with these kind of high quality problems. Oh, heck no. I was dealing with very different problems back then. 20 years ago, my biggest problem was that I could not afford to move out of my parents' house. I was a boomerang generation. After undergrad, I moved back home with my parents. I couldn't afford to live on my own. And I was just thinking, how can I make more money how can I get a job and make more money to be independent and move out of my parents' house? That was my biggest problem. And then 15 years ago, my biggest problem was how can I get into the prerequisite classes to get into NP school, to become a nurse practitioner? In fact, I remember I was at my local community college before I applied for NP school. I was trying to get on my prereqs. So, like microbiome, anatomy, chemistry, physiology, all those things. And in my community college, anatomy was so hard to get into. It was like so freaking hard to get into. You might have had this experience. Like anatomy is really, really high demand. And so I remember I would have to hit refresh on the computer nonstop the minute the registration opened up so that I could nab a spot and register for that class. Because if you did not register within like 2 minutes when the registration opportunity opened, then the class was full. And then you had to go into the first day of anatomy class and sit there because you were waitlisted and hope and pray and cross your fingers that someone who was registered did not show up on the first day and then would get kicked out of the class, and then you would be able to slip in from the wait list to be registered in the class and get their spot. That was my problem 15 years ago. That was my biggest problem, was like getting into anatomy class on time, registering, or getting off the wait list to be registered. 10 years ago, my problem was, how do I pass my board exam? Oh, geez, how do I get all this information, cram it into my brain so I can remember it and pass my board exam to become a nurse practitioner? 8 years ago, my problem was, how do I have a good marriage? Because I got married 8 years ago. 6 years ago, my biggest problem was, how do I raise a good child? How do I raise a child in this world to be able to cope and to succeed and to build his own happiness and success? Now my problems are of higher caliber. My patients trust me, they believe in me, and they are looking for guidance from me. What medication do I recommend for treatment for them? Could this cause a life or death situation? And so my problems have gotten at a higher level each time. And no, when your problems are of a higher caliber, you know, when you elevate yourself in life, you have higher level problems. When you elevate yourself in life, you have higher level problems. And, it is a privilege to have higher problems. It is 100% a privilege to have higher problems. I am not taking that for granted at all. I have so much gratitude for that. And you should too, because not everyone deals with the kind of problems that we have as nurse practitioners. Like, we deal with high caliber, high stake emotion burden problems. But when you have higher level problems, you you have harder feelings that you are exposed to. And it is so easy to revert to how you are your whole life, your old habits. It's so easy to feel fear, burnout, worry, anxiety, because you haven't adjusted your mind and how you interpret your thoughts and your feelings of a higher caliber as well. Um, it's funny. So I'm going to totally age myself, but I'm going to say this very proudly. I am 41 years old. I'm 41. I am officially in my middle age, because middle age is from 40 to, I think, 65. So I'm officially in my midlife. I have low back pain when I carry my 6-year-old son. I have shoulder pain when I am typing on the computer on the EHR and documenting my notes too long. My body reminds me that I'm not in my 20s anymore. I'm getting older. But my brain hasn't really caught up to my physical body, to my physical age. Sometimes my brain still thinks that I can get away with eating fast food, junk food, like in my 20s, and I can just metabolize it away. I won't gain the weight. I won't feel sluggish afterwards. When we have parties or potlucks at work, I'm like, oh, there's some cake, there's some cupcakes, there's some sweets, desserts. Oh, I can easily eat some and I'll be fine. And then in an hour, I'm all sluggish and it's so hard for me to use my brain and make medical decisions. And I hope I'm not alone in feeling this way. I really hope I'm not alone feeling this way. I did my research for this episode specifically. Did you know that the mind adapts slower than the body? The mind adapts slower than the body. Physical changes in your body relies on direct cellular repair. For example, if you were an athlete in your youth, if you did softball, volleyball, running, football in your youth, in college, maybe you had a lot of past athletic injuries, or like, sprains or tears in your tendons. Maybe the cartilage in your knees have worn out faster. So now you're than someone who wasn't as active in their youth, in their college years. So maybe you have more osteoarthritis, more degenerative disc disease. And so you feel that, you see that. And on the other end of the spectrum, maybe you weren't as active. No judgment. Maybe you weren't as active. You didn't use your muscles as much. I have a lot of patients who are not physically active, all different ages, all different ranges. And they don't utilize their muscles, and they're not exercising on a regular basis. And we all know the phrase in medicine: you don't use it, you lose it. All right. In fact, studies demonstrate that muscle atrophies after 2 to 3 weeks of non-use. Just yesterday, I had a patient. She didn't really exercise, and she underwent a total knee replacement. surgery, and she's doing physical therapy, which is standard for post-op. And she's learning that she never really utilized her quadricep muscles very well, and so she's relearning, retraining how to use these leg muscles that she hasn't used and are so weakened and atrophied. And I think the biggest reason that we see our bodies changing is because we see it. It's visible to the eyes. We can see the physical changes. Like when I had my baby, when I had my son, like, oh, I don't have skinny abs anymore. um, I'm getting older. My spine is, when you get older, you see your spine isn't as straight, or maybe your joints are more, they hurt more with walking, more activity. So with your body, everything is more observable. All the changes are more observable. Your mind is not as observable. Mental changes, they actually require structural rewiring and solidifying new synaptic connections in the brain and pruning old unused connections. In fact, the brain actually resists rapid change to protect existing memories, old identity, and just core survival models from being overridden. And so that is why it is so hard to change old habits and replace them with new habits. I'll give you a personal example. So, being totally vulnerable and honest, I love snacking. I love snacking. It gives me so much pleasure and joy. Like when I walk by the kitchen in my house and I'm gonna go outside to pick up, drive and pick up my son from school, I'd pass by the kitchen, I grab a snack. I grab a cookie, I grab a chip. If I'm walking past the pantry after washing the dishes, I might grab some chocolate. Just earlier this week, my husband was looking in the freezer and he asked, "Where did all the ice cream go?" A little guilty. But now at my age, I can't just eat and snack whenever I want. I can see the extra calories actually landing somewhere on my body. I don't metabolize it right away like I was 15 years old. And so I am working so hard to retrain my brain just to ride out these urges. When I pass the pantry, I have this visceral urge to reach over and get a snack, get a piece of candy, get some chocolate, get a chip. I'm like, what? My brain, I can hear my brain saying, like, one cookie, one chip. It's okay. Just one. You've done it before. It's nothing new. And that is an urge. But the thing is, an urge is not a command. That's just my old way of thinking, old habits, my brain trying to give into those urges, because before I would give into those urges. So now when I'm not giving into those urges, I sit and I feel that urge more longer. And it creates anxiety in my body. I'm like, I got to get rid of this urge. I got to feel relief by getting that chip, getting that cookie, getting that snack. And I'm rewiring my brain at the same time, but it is so hard because you feel that anxiety and you want to get relief from that anxiety. And to let those urges go unanswered and just let them kind of sit and just wash and wave and fizzle. And finally, whether it's like 20 minutes, whether it's 2 hours for it to go away, to finally go away, that is so hard. If you understand whether you have urges for snacking or whatever bad habits you have, that is hard, right? That is your autonomic nervous system. It is that fight or flight. Your body wants to feel safe. It does not like feeling those urges, that anxiety. It wants to feel safe. It wants to feel relief. And so when you elevate your life, you have higher level problems. You cannot operate on the same autonomic nervous system. You cannot operate with the same standards for your feelings and how you interpret your feelings. And so the higher level your problems, the harder feelings you are exposed to. The higher up, the lonelier it can feel for you to stay with the same way of thinking. Your brain has to match what your body is doing. And you cannot operate the same autonomic nervous system and emotional regulation that you did before you were a nurse practitioner. Because as a nurse practitioner, you have higher level problems. I hope this is making sense. I'm going to end this with an analogy, and I hope this really ties it all together and just kind of really brings it home and makes it all make sense. So, like I said, the higher up, the more lonely it can feel. I want to talk to you about giraffes. Giraffes, beautiful creatures. Giraffes are the tallest animals on the planet. They can grow up to 20 feet tall. 20 feet. We're talking like a 2-story building, or like lengthwise 2 passenger cars parked bumper to nose, like that long or that tall. And giraffes are so tall, they eat at their level of vision. Giraffes eat at their level of vision. Giraffes eat at the very top of the trees. Because of their height, they can graze and peruse and eat at the top of the tree, the top leaves, the top nutrients there. And I researched this as well. Science shows that the top leaves of the top, sorry, science shows that the top leaves, the top vegetation on the trees has the higher concentration of nutrients. Did you know that? So the leaves at the top of the trees, they're called sun leaves. They generally have higher concentrations of nitrogen because they get the most sunlight, the most photosynthesis, they produce most sugar, carbohydrates, and they are vital. This nitrogen is vital for providing protein synthesis to animals. They are the core building blocks for building protein, DNA, RNA in their bodies. And so these amino acid building blocks, they are so important and vital for giraffes. They help the giraffes sustain their heavy 20-foot frames and their long, like 6, 7, 8 feet necks. And so giraffes need those nutrients. Giraffes eat at the level of their vision. They eat from the top of the trees. And turtles eat from the grass, from the ground. Turtles eat at their level of vision. Giraffes do not eat at the level of turtles. Giraffes have a 25-pound heart that pumps blood nearly 7, 8 feet up their long neck to their brain. And so the giraffes need the strongest nutrients. A 25-pound heart, 25 pounds, that's like what, a 2-year-old? A 2.5-year-old? Like, can you imagine like a 2-year-old toddler is the size of a giraffe's heart? Holy Toledo. Like, I was really shocked when I read this. I didn't know the statistic. In fact, did you know that a giraffe can only bend their neck and their head down for about 20 to 25 seconds at a time to drink water? A giraffe has a very special system of blood vessels and valves that really help control their blood pressure. And so when they bend down, this special system, this net of blood vessels stops too much blood from rushing down to their brain when their head is bent down. But giraffes cannot bend their head down too long, or else their blood pressure balance may alter, and it could become extremely dangerous. They can faint, they can have a brain hemorrhage or an aneurysm. And so giraffes do not and cannot eat at the level of turtles. When you are built to be this tall, it is a rarity. You are a rarity. When you are this tall, you are a rarity. You see a view of the world. You see a view of reality that most people cannot and will not ever understand. And you will endanger yourself when you lower your perspective. There are about 461,000 licensed nurse practitioners in the US. We represent 0.1% of the nation, not even 1%. We represent 0.1%. We are a rarity. We are incredibly rare. We cannot lower our perspectives. We have to have a better mindset. And so, just like a giraffe, you need to refuel your body and your brain for the better current version of you as a nurse practitioner. You are no longer the younger version of you whose biggest problem was how do I move out of my parents' house? No. Now, maybe your biggest problem now is how do I regulate my nervous system and hold onto these uncomfortable feelings and learn that it's okay and that everything will be okay and that my body is safe. It is a skill to learn to hold on to those uncomfortable feelings, those urges, that anxiety that feels uncomfortable, and learn that it's safe. You are safe. The real growth is developing the emotional resilience and nervous system regulation to hold onto uncertainty, grief, responsibility without letting it define your identity. It's about transforming your identity into a higher version with more capacity to hold more within those higher level problems. And if this really resonated with you, you're like, oh my gosh, Nicole, you are speaking to my soul, then I invite you to click the link below this video or this podcast episode and join our free weekly email newsletter family, where I give weekly private reflections, real-time insight, and clear actionable tactics you can use to make your way of practice better. Last week's email, we talked about how to be easily laughable and how to bring more joy in your work because laughter is actually the best free therapy you can actually have. This week's email newsletter is really exciting. It's about how to have better feeling days, how to hold on to those uncomfortable feelings and without letting them define you. And it's so good. It's so good. And so, we all knew that working as a nurse practitioner would be hard. But at the end of the day, we just want to feel like it matters. That's all we want. And so click the link below. I invite you join our email newsletter. It is so much fun. And in your first email, you may receive a free gift from me. In our line of work, we are given so many strategies, so many tactics. I mean, even already in my practice, we have an update with our EHR next week. There's a new quick button for you. There's a new shortcut. Here's this tactic will shave off a couple seconds from your day. But the truth is, you don't rise with more strategy, you rise with more capacity. I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, then you should definitely watch my last episode when success starts to feel like a trap. Otherwise, I will see you all in the next episode. And remember, I am always rooting for you.